Okay, start recording.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
It looks like you're making some.
All right.
You're making the green things bounce.
Okay.
What we could just make this the actual podcast. I don't want
Y-
to test all day.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
We can just keep talking.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how it's normally done.
yeah.
Right?
It's like it's slightly unnatural trying to stay close to keep your face close to a microphone, but it's kind of
Yeah.
fun.
It is. Right. Well, neither of us done this, so.
Have you done stand-up comedy?
Me? No. I know you have.
Yeah.
What's that like?
I mean, part of the fun is just that there's a microphone and you talk into it. Like like your nerves are slightly overcome by the fact that you have. It's like your little. It's like having a little toy that, like, your security blanket or something like that. Like,
Right.
I may be up here all alone, but I get to play with this. I get to
Thing.
talk into this microphone.
And you don't. And you have to listen.
Yeah.
But don't you? I always. I've admitted this to my class now, or classes. I mean, that's part of the appeal of teaching is that you have to listen to me. And I get to control the dynamics of the conversation.
Oh
Yeah,
my
I mean,
god.
how would you compare that to teaching? I mean, we're both teachers, and you've done stand up. I haven't, so
Yeah, I think they're pretty similar. So I just realized I forgot to transition to the shot. I mean, I just transitioned to you like
okay. Right now,
5 seconds into your last comment, and then but it's like I wasn't doing. I was off asleep at the switch
oh,
over here.
because I asked really good questions.
Yeah. I mean, the technology is secondary. This can't be how Lex Friedman does it. He shouldn't. You should.
No, he has a degree in computer science. He's probably automated it by now, yeah, or
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu or whatever he's into that week.
Well, I mean, we're getting 2 video streams the whole time,
Right.
but I should be able to just edit it later
Right.
to figure out.
I mean, I'm saying right. I don't know. I'm just just agreeing with you. No, but you've done comedy. I'm actually kind of interested in that. How do you? Because sometimes in almost every class that I teach, 1 or 2 students will be like, "Have you done comedy?" I always get asked that question, and I go, "No, I haven't." And I go, "I don't want to because that's too much pressure." This is very like teaching
That's
is
a
very.
compliment. That's
yeah.
a good compliment that they've asked
It
me
is, but it's also like I also have this sense that comedy is hard because now you're on the spot to make it funny. Like my job is to teach them. The funny is like icing on the cake,
Yeah.
you know.
So I have thoughts from having done this last men's weekend of what teaching that actually teaching is not just so the point, or what a good teacher does is they make like a true good teacher, like fucking Buddha or somebody,
Yeah,
is they make their students do good in the world. Like
Yeah.
that's what a good teacher
that's
does.
I have. Well, I mean, I haven't thought about it, but yeah, I kind of I agree. Yeah.
I-
That's a good way of putting
I'm
it.
not claiming I've done that
Yeah.
myself. I'm very, very seldom have I done that. But
But that's the intention, right? That's the intention. Yeah. That's a good way of putting
that's
it.
what makes me think a good teacher is good. Like
Yeah.
I'm like that teacher makes me. Like they care. They care about who I am. Like, but it's like I always heard that before. Like, you can only get somebody to you can only get somebody to do. You can only get your students to inspire students if you care about them. But I always thought that meant just care about them, like, oh, care about them.
Yeah.
But really it means like, no, you want to, like, you care that they do
Do
Go
good.
do good. Go do a
Yeah.
good job.
Oh, and maybe hold them accountable to some standard. I think, I mean, that statement has a lot of pieces to it, I think. And what does it mean that, hey, you should do good in the world? It's like one of those statements that, eat sugar less. Like, what does that mean? We have
That's
no
right,
idea.
that's
We have
right.
no idea what that means. Or drink in moderation. Got it, But go do good in the world. Are you good? Yeah, I'm basically a good person. It's ambiguous to the point where it means nothing also. But I think I know what you're saying. In this that in the like I teach a particular subject, you teach a particular subject. In the context of that subject, like you want them to have at least I want them to have a certain level of understanding and mastery, and then use it to contribute to the world in a positive way. In whatever we're teaching them, but also in a general sense, so like have an orientation that is positive. Like sometimes I feel like at least in our society, students are people in general are taught that you're important and your utility matters the most, right? That's a typical economic argument. Felix.
These microphones are doing their job right now.
Right
So,
now,
yeah,
right? Yeah, picking up the cat.
They're not picking up the
Oh,
cat.
they're not
I'm
picking
sure
up the
they're
cat.
not. You know what I
Okay,
mean? It's like,
okay.
yeah, he can whine all he wants to.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
no problem.
The, but yeah, it's so where our system is largely based on that kind of thinking, where find your whatever it is in life, and live your passion, and find what makes you happy. And there's a lot of like individual centered sort of communication in that, which is important. But also, what's also equally important is like there's a whole other world out there which we're a part of, and that I think should be an equally important part of that. I mean, we're neither completely selfish nor completely altruistic. We oscillate between these two. If they are, I mean, nothing is a true bookend in that sense. But if conceptually you want to call them bookends, yeah, we kind of oscillate between those two things. And so, I think it's a good way of putting that, actually, for students to go out and, if your impulse is like, "Am I doing good?" Like, if you ask that question regularly in different contexts, I think you actually end up doing good more often than not.
what is what is a problem facing the urban planning community right now? Like, what are the big problems right now?
Oh boy, where do you start? Well, urban planning to me is like civilization. So it's like asking, what are the big problems?
Not like the game Civilization, but like
no. Although I've had students, I've more than a few times. Why'd you get into urban planning? Oh, I was playing SimCity a lot. Whatever got you here, that's cool. It's fine. But yeah, so I mean, I view planning as sort of as everything, which is of course going back to, if it's everything, then maybe it's nothing, or what is it? You got to define it a little better than that, right? So, if traditional planning is land use, right, concerned with land use in some way, and so in California, for example, the biggest issues are affordable housing. But globally and in California, it's resource utilization, things that are related to sustainability somehow, right? And then so you go, well, okay, heard that dog and pony show before, right? Like it becomes a buzzword that everybody says.
resource utilization,
Or sustainability.
sustainability.
Sustainability. So it's like, what does sustainability mean then? And that includes resource utilization. That includes climate change. Another huge buzzword that I think we all use, and sometimes all of us, myself included, are not quite sure like what it means and how it applies. But that being said, there are specific ways to talk about these things, right? Sustainability, for example, is typically defined along 3 dimensions, and that's economic development. So poverty would be part of that, right? Addressing poverty issues, and then environment. So resource, climate change would be part of that, and then equity, which is again.
Oh, that's sort of like, I almost thought you were going to bring that up as part of the economic development, but it's its own
It's an own thing.
lens. Did it take a? Is that is that a recent development that it got its own?
No, I should have known you were going to ask that. Why? Just last week it's been added. No, it's not. This has actually been, it's been traditionally called the 3 E's of sustainability. Again, it's not the only way to define it, but it sounds kind of neat when you say 3 E's. I think that's why the definition stuck many, many years ago.
Okay.
And let me give you an example. Like in Saudi Arabia, for example, you can have high levels of economic development. It's a rich country, right? And now they own PGA. Hey, yay! Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, that's an interesting sports story, huh?
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, it really is. I don't know. I haven't done my research, but that's I mean, if you have, feel free.
No, I know I haven't. I was just reading like how Phil Mickelson was going off.
Yeah.
I think he was going off about that, and then this writer was writing that. Well, he was right. He was like they are. I'm not sure we want to be in bed with them, but they have a lot of money, and so sometimes you got to play. And people are like, "What? I can't believe you're saying that." And anyway, I don't know anything about golf, but the way the writer phrased it, it just seemed interesting. And so
for sure.
Yeah, and so you take a country like Saudi Arabia, where they have high levels of income or economically developed.
Yeah.
But equity is missing with respect to, let's say, women's rights, right?
Yeah.
Like women only recently got the right to drive. There's severe limitations on types of. I shouldn't say severe, but there's constraints that women have that don't exist in other similarly developed countries, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why equity or becomes an issue here. My sister's friend Chandana was telling me there's a place here, I forget what the name she called it, but it's like the health disparities are so significant where it's like life expectancy is like decades lower for the people that live in this particular area. It's somewhere in this Bay Area. I forget what the name of the place was. She was just telling me today, and it's probably related to like there was some kind of water contamination or environmental contamination, and it was related to the Navy. Again, I don't know the details, so again, I'm not sure what she was referring to, but that's a perfect example of like of a equity issue. Is like why do certain populations have, and it's not always like populations of color. It's all it can be depending on the condition or the disease that we're looking at. It can be white alone. I'm going to use demographic characteristics here. White alone or Asians. Like Asians have, I think Asian women have higher rates of certain types of, is it ovarian cancer? Again, I forget the exact, but you can look at different health conditions that emerge in a population at higher rates than other populations. And some of that may be due to genetic factors, other things, right? But some of them may be due to environmental things, which certain populations are more exposed to. So equity would sort of play a role in this. But an important question in equity is like, what are we trying to achieve? Because sometimes, like, and philosophically speaking, like, if we say things like, well, do we want everybody to have the same wealth and income, or do we want everybody to have the same opportunity, right? Because people can make different choices and decide to play the income game in different ways, as long as they have the opportunity to progress and make their way forward economically, right? And so typically in this country, at least, we say opportunity is the most important thing, right? And whether you choose to use that and become wealthy or not wealthy is up to you. That's so when we talk about equity with respect to income, we're not saying everybody has the exact same level of income. But then we could look at factors related to equity and say, does everybody have the same opportunity to move forward, right? And
Yeah, so something about Saudi Arabia and that side of the world, like, yeah, it makes the mind immediately leap to like it's a perfect setup for that third, bringing in that third plank of equity.
Yeah, it is, right? Yeah.
You just picture the richness of part of the people that are just being off the scale, but then it's like, well, no, they're not like. But Michael Moore's not making movies about how we should all follow their example or anything.
Nobody, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it's a good point, right? Yeah, we're not getting films and things like that about, but that's a pretty easy example to point to. But it becomes more difficult when you are dealing with issues that are related to equity, like, and we're going through a lot of them in our country right now, right? And what does it mean to be sort of left out structurally speaking, right? And what are the merits of that argument? And so, without getting into the details and where I think my larger point is that when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about leaving the planet for our future generations, but in a way where our future generations are able to enjoy the same things we are, and not just people, but also like your cat and the flora and fauna that we share this planet with. Because as far as we know, life is a pretty singular experience to Earth right now, right? And it'd be kind of a shame that we don't that our response to the problems that we have uniquely created, the human race, is that we need to get off this planet to save ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
but there's your cat, there's my cat, there's the trees, there's things that have existed that, if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, like again, we've all these alien stories keep coming out. Okay, you're probably not alone statistically, but it's also an alien race may be so far away that we may not have any, or we have encounters with their AI that they launched a billion years ago or a million years ago. Right? Who knows? There's no point in speculating about that until the event actually happens. So far, as we know in our neck of the woods, we're kind of the only game in town as far as life goes, right? And it's a beautiful planet. So um,
So what does it look like to plan for the 3 R's? Like, what is that?
E's, 3 E's.
Oh yeah, my
Equity.
background in education coming up there.
Yeah, the 3 R's. Yeah. R and R. Um, and so here's where my answer is going to sound a little bit. Um, what's the right word? It's going to sound a little bit foo-fooey, in the sense that I'm going to say that I think the way to plan for it is really for everybody to do work in the area that they are most interested in, right? So, like when we were roommates, and when you were in UCLA, you were into recycling at that point, and you took it upon yourself. And I mean, you went pretty far down that rabbit hole and created a whole. That's not the right way to phrase it. You created an entire program for recycling, right? If I remember correctly.
I got to be part of a grant that was written for some recycling bins.
Yeah, but you really kind of took it to another level, if I remember correctly, right? And that was when, and there was a whole point when you weren't even driving, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I didn't have a car most of the time I was at UCLA. But
Right.
I was like a college. I mean, I'm still arguable.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying there are choices you made to do certain things that were consistent with whatever belief system you had, but they were for the good, the common good. That's what I'm trying to get at. And you've more or less you have in the different trajectories of your life, I think you've had that thrust more or less, right? So whatever you are now, let's say with the men's weekend, right? Like there's another thrust for doing good, right? In that context. And so I think, because that's what's your interest right now. That's what resonates with you. And so there's a technical question, what we should do in the context of planning. But I think the deeper question is what we should do as individuals. Because if we're really going to actually do good in this planet, more of us need to get involved with the things that we care about, and in a consistent way. And it seems like a foolishly simple answer, but it is literally the answer.
I mean, are you able to like work that into your lectures? Like,
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
how? Like, I was like.
This
It seems like just seems like you know, that you could probably like get up at church and tell people that,
and maybe nothing would come of it.
but to actually be able to like tell your urban planning class,
Yeah.
like, hey,
Well, I mean, it's interesting.
it's not about urban planning; it's about the way you live your life. I mean, I think that's always a good message, but
you have to tie it back, right? So you have to be strategic about it. If I'm like when I'm talking to you in this, it's the tone is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
In class, I'll say these sort of lofty things, and then I'll tie it back into, but you're planners and you have an obligation. You chose this field because it impacts almost every aspect of people's lives, and it does.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if you're a planner and you're interested in water, well, okay, there's everything from City of LA has a plan to go 100% water reclaim. I forget what the year is. There's part of planning deals with stormwater management, right? There's these water reports every city has to produce with to basically plan for population expansion and how they're going to serve the needs of the population given projected water use, right? The biggest category of water use in the United States is actually thermoelectric generation. We use most of our water to generate electricity. Most people don't know that. We're like, well, it's for food and it's for drinking. But the biggest consumptive category of water is it's not all consumptive because hydroelectric is not consumptive, but the biggest category of water use is we use it for electricity generation, right? So like you have a coal plant, right? How do you create electricity out of that? The energy in the coal is used to create steam, which drives the turbine. Water, right? So you can go through every type of. We don't normally think of that as like a water issue, right? So like when I tell my students is that if you're interested in water, there's 100 different ways to play this. You could just be all about like managing the lake in your city that you're working on. So, like I was walking on Lake Merritt today, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of algae in here. Right? That one of the I was talking to Chandan And she goes, "Oh, that's everywhere on the Bay Area." Well, algae blooms are they're the perfect for. That's like the last indicator. Like your water is quality is just it is dead. Because algae will suck the life out of water. And so that's what I mean. So like if you're interested in like, wow, I really care about Oakland. A project is like, I can't fix the world, but maybe I can fix Lake Merritt. Um,
So in a way, it's a broad field. So like you almost can like
Pick and
that.
choose.
That's why it lends itself toward like a sort of a this is how you live your life because you can almost
Yeah.
turn it toward so planning. Your students might be getting jobs in any number of fields.
Well, most of them tend to go to. I mean, we're a pipeline in the cities, right? And that's our at Cal Poly Pomona, and
Municipal governments.
yeah, municipal governments and so on. But and we have amazing students, and I really mean that because it's like my students are, some of them are working, getting internships, and going to school. They're just like hustling, right? They're many of them are like first in their families to go to college. It's like when you see that, you're like, wow, this is what Cal States were designed to do.
Nice.
But, to create that upward mobility and to create the next generation of like professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we're doing. And but yeah, many of them also don't work. I mean, they don't work for cities. They go work for everything from developers to in completely different fields entirely sometimes because the skills are broadly applicable to anywhere you want to problem solve, right? And really, but planning uniquely lends itself to kind of these broad civilizational type questions. But my point was like it, you can really drill down into the nitty. You're like, I'm all about how the state regulates cities to do better stormwater management planning, and now like the average person does not think about that at all, but it's absolutely civilizationally important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean, somehow I do find some of these environmental questions are very interesting. Like somehow like the whole question about the plastic, the island of plastic bags in the middle of the ocean.
the North Pacific Gyre,
Yeah.
it's floating around.
Or like this, or just questions about like. I was just found myself asking like, how do they lay it? There must be cable across the ocean. Somebody explained like, yeah, it's at the bottom of the ocean.
It is, yeah.
And they rolled it out. I mean, they must
Yeah.
have rolled it out somehow.
The ships that also did, yeah.
I wonder how that got done.
Yeah, and it's exactly civilizationally important. If somebody has done it, in this case, it's a private corporation usually, or depending on the country. Somewhere it's more public, somewhere it's private.
Yeah.
But yeah, the North Pacific gyres is the best example. You have these microplastics. We don't. I mean, that's the thing. Like we'll if we were like if we're kind of aware, we'll try to recycle plastic, right? But really, the recycling rate for plastic is abysmally
good,
it's
yeah.
very low. Cardboard very high.
That's right. It was always of the bottles and cans, and it was always glass and aluminum are better,
Yeah,
cleaner
Right.
recycling commodities than
plastic,
Yeah,
right?
plastic
But
is the worst.
it is, and it's made using a fossil fuel. So yeah, plastic is no good except it's very convenient,
Yeah.
and so and that's what sustainability to me, and I think anybody who's looking at these questions really means is like, how are you balancing all these different needs, right? But balancing them in a way where like you're making real progress towards fixing some of the issues that exist. Otherwise, it's just you're just sort of repeating more of the same, and you're normalizing heavy consumption, right? So like the larger question, I mean, there are a lot of larger questions, but is our economy creates an ethos of consumption,
Yeah.
and happiness through consumption, and there's no happiness through consumption in the end. But that's just
Yeah.
that's a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's and I don't mean consumption, just conspicuous consumption where you're like, like we were walking around Trader Joe's today, and you're like, hey, let's just talk, and why not? It seems,
It's a kind of I mean, there's something about it. Like
Yeah.
there's something about going to the store and buying things.
it's a little dopamine hit.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is. And buying things on Amazon. I mean, there are all these.
Right.
Just buying these microphones recently. It was like.
Fun.
There's
Yeah.
something about
Yeah.
I'm getting the thing. I'm just dopamine. I'm sure that's it.
Yeah, it's triggered there, but it's fleeting. It doesn't last. It's not deeply satisfying. It's like you have the cheap candy and the sugar wears off in about 2 minutes, and you need another hit very
Yep.
quickly.
Yeah, it's not
Right.
sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
But what it does is it feeds the economy,
Right.
and and the way companies are evaluated is that their stock prices are directly indexed to quarterly growth. So if a company is growing a lot by selling you more things you don't need, its stock prices are going because we have we have what 1/4 of the roughly of the world's labor force employed in some type of financial industry. So, which is a bizarre thing, and I mean, it's so normalized that it's not bizarre, but it's a bizarre thing. It's like you have people who are making money off the movement of these things called stocks that are indexed to a company,
Hmm.
or I'm sorry, that's the wrong word.
The whole world of finances, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird because there's a whole group of people making money when the company makes money, but when it loses money too, when they
Some
short
people who
this.
make money off of that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's unclear what is being added to the human experience as a now. Again,
I just always imagine money having a little bit of a self-generative property, like it's like, you just, where all the money's being traded, there's just naturally money just gets some money gets so
yeah,
somebody else who's just standing around there, some more you can
yeah.
grab some of that money,
Guess
that's
where that
kind of what
money?
happens,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I mean,
It
I
propagates. And
yeah,
stuff.
it does, right? And I have yeah. So my more my funnier, more conservative, funnier friends out of the one they use these labels, right? Always like you're gonna. That's a very communist type thinking, right? Sometimes I'm like, I always say like, hey, that's like don't have communist type thinking. Like, money is good, capitalism is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like what you're kind of alluding to here is that we tend to, and Marx used to talk a lot about this, right? And Marx is a kind of a good example of like somebody who well he wasn't he can be fabulously wrong about some of his ideas, but
Mm-hmm.
his critiques of capitalism are not bad either. Again, it doesn't have to be black or white. In the end of the day, you can take what is valuable and useful from anybody, right? In the end, and he talks about fetishism of commodities, and he talks about which is like treating commodities uh, or or he uses a phrase called reification, like treating something abstract as real. And so money starts to have those kinds of properties where you're like you just use the word, you take it and it grows. Like it has these sort of labels that are organic almost, right? And so I think you're kind of correct, and at least I think you're alluding there is that people who are involved in the financial they see it like that. Like the thing that is supposed to provide you the good that actually you need for your life, it become the so what Marx used to say, when the means to a good becomes the end to itself, which is money becomes the end,
Hmm.
not the good that it's providing. He goes, that's a problem. Like, psychologically, that's a problem, and I think we have that now. But you have and whether you're doing it in Vegas and gambling on blackjack or whatever, it's a particular, to me, it's a particular kind of addiction. Or you're in Wall Street and now you just want to win in the game.
Right. Like, so you might, and some people get it. Yeah, it's another kind of dopamine, right? Like, you check your stocks.
Yeah,
Did they go up?
I feel good today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they went up.
I'm a winner.
They went up.
I'm
yeah.
a winner.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it makes more sense than being excited about your Facebook likes or whatever. But
Well, yeah, because at least
to use a dated reference that nobody likes.
some
anything
people our
about.
age get it, yeah. and the boomers get it. Yeah.
So to push back to like and then there's sort of going back to sustainability.
Yeah.
Are you what do you think about would you call yourself a natalist?
A natalist? What does that even mean? You gotta explain that to me. I've heard the word. I don't know how to.
Natal, well,
I know what natal means, but like, I suspect you're using
I
it.
feel
in
like
some
natal means belly button, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to talk about any kind of kink. I'm talking about sustainability. So like natalism, I thought meant having to do with being like to be anti-natalist would be to like somebody who believes that we should all stop having kids.
Oh, like that.
So yeah, a better way to set it up. I wasn't. Better way to set it up would be like it would be a planner, maybe some kind of planner who was working in China, who came up with that one-child policy. That was
it was a planner who did
yeah.
come up with that, and it catastrophically backfired on them, right? So are you asking me what my personal opinion on this is?
I guess it's about our future. Do you think we should be having? It's probably out of our control, But
Well, I mean, I can tell you what the data is showing now. In this one, I agree with our savior Elon Musk. Uh, Elon, if you're out there, thank you. uh, it is no. I mean, if you look at the world population projections, really, where population only place that's really growing for fertility is exceeding 2.1, which is replacement level,
mm-hmm.
is like places like in sub-Saharan Africa, some parts of Asia, right?
Mm-hmm.
India is also plummeting. I mean, it's the most populous nation now. I
The
think
curve
India.
is flattening on India's
It is,
population
yeah.
growth.
It's like it's what is it, 2.5, 2.3? I forget what the exact number is, but it's heading very close to 2.1,
Huh.
and it'll probably dip there too. U.S. used to be 2.1, almost dead on.
Uh-huh.
Maybe 20, 30 years ago. We are like 1.6 right now.
Okay.
So
Wasn't Japan down to like 1.0 or something?
Japan is like 1.3. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. South Korea is even lower.
Really?
Yeah,
Huh.
China is 1.
China's real low.
Well, they took off the one-child policy, and people were like, "No,
Yeah,
we're
we don't
good.
have. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, yeah.
we don't want. We
It
don't.
turns it turns out you have to inspire people to have kids, right? Like if you put any disincentive in there,
So
they'll be like, yeah, okay, I
okay,
won't have them.
here's going back, maybe bring it full circle, right? So we talked about equity earlier, right? And this is where the sort of a traditional conservative analysis runs runs into equity in ways that people don't often think. And there's two ways to look at this, depending on where you fall. That's why planning is fun to me. Where it, so we talked about women's rights. We talked about Saudi Arabia as an example, where sometimes they have less rights. Um, what we do know is that when women have greater labor force participation, generally, and they have greater control over their sexual reproductive health, tend to have less kids. This seems to be a pattern. Okay, that's an equity thing, isn't it? Like,
It's one of the indices, right?
right, it's one of the indices, right?
Yeah.
Now you're like, hey, everybody's participating. We're hitting all cylinders. We got full labor force participation. Oh, here's the other problem. We're just not reproducing. So then you come along with this sort of traditional, let's call it traditional analysis, which is, you see, this was a bad idea. When women were having kids and not working, at least we had 2 kids and the society was chugging right along, right? So you could see how easily somebody could take the equity thing and sort of turn it on its head and say it was bad for society.
Yeah.
And how do you analyze that, right? I know how I look at it. I think equity is good, but I can also see why somebody would come out and say that it's a problem. Now, the question you asked me earlier, is it a problem? Personally speaking, my view on all these things is like, well, sometimes things go up, sometimes things go down, and maybe the human race. And this is going to sound strangely, it's not meant to be misanthropic or anything like that, but like we've had several extinction events on the planet, right? And the greatest one was something called the Great Permian. It's called the Great Dying, the Permian extinction. What was it, 300 million years ago? I'm forgetting the exact time period, but it was something like 95%. I forget what the exact percentage was, but almost all life on the planet was wiped out. And we're unsure of the cause. We think it was a super volcano. I say we. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't study these things, but things that I've read.
Yeah.
So we've come very close to life being completely extinguished in our corner, and it had nothing to do with. Since sustainability, there's a word we throw around a lot. It's called anthropogenic, human caused. It had nothing to do with anthropogenic causes, right? You or me driving our gas-powered cars or whatever. It was just a volcano that went off and almost killed off all of life on Earth. So, is it a good or bad thing? I can only answer that from a human perspective. But if I take my human perspective out and I say, the planet is largely indifferent to us. If humans die off, the planet will flourish. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that maybe it's time for us to go. The third way is my human perspective, which is like, humans are pretty cool. Despite all the crap that we have done to each other, like we produce art and poetry and some just things that are whether you believe in God or not, I mean, that's you can still be divine, in the sense that like there are things that are sublime and that are almost divine, right? Like you feel a connection to the world, the universe, with some of the art that we create, and it'd be a shame to lose that, right? And the way our world is set up right now, it doesn't having less people our financial system, right? Because younger people pay into the healthcare, they pay into pension schemes that older people use. It does not work having less kids.
Right, right. So in other words, like,
But
so yeah,
it can work if we but we have to really think about our financial systems, how the world is set up.
yeah, it makes so it kind of makes sense to like to say to Nate like be pro having kids or anti having kids. Well, that's kind of overly simplistic,
Yes,
and it goes back to what you were talking about, where people make their own life choices.
they do. Right.
But like, but you're not going to sit here and say we should all stop having kids
No.
because, or you know,
Or go out and have kids.
or we should all start having kids.
Yeah.
But like maybe another way of thinking about it would be like, well, how many people is the Earth really meant to support,
Yeah,
or like
yeah.
or do we have has the resources to support? So
Right.
I guess that would be a question because do you
And at what level of and what level of quality of life, standard of living, right?
Right.
And AI that is coming out is a complication in all of that. So I mean we haven't even gotten into that part.
Well, like some technologists say like, oh, we'll overcome whatever challenges there are to resources. We'll overcome all of them. But others say, no, we're way over. Like we were over our skis.
Yeah. Well, in the 70s, that was the idea that there's a book called The Population Bomb, or
Yeah.
something like that. And no, we had subsequent green revolutions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the statistics are also pretty. I mean, I've been talking. I didn't go down that sort of that rabbit hole of global capitalism, but like if you look at poverty, extreme poverty rates, the percentage of people that right, economic development, people living below extreme poverty. It used to be $1 a day line. Now it's like $2.15 a day line. In the 80s, it was much worse. Like today, it's like 1 in 10, something like that. In the 80s, I think it was like closer to 1 in 4, 1 in 3, whatever that stat is.
That's encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Of course, just because somebody's making $3 a day doesn't mean like they're living this magical life, right? That is an important question. Like people are like not. Extreme poverty is a line that when you fall below that, it's like you have a serious probability of not having enough food that you could die in the short term.
Right.
Right. And so yes, we have to get people beyond that line, but like just because they're barely above doesn't mean they're thriving also. Okay. But that being said, the world's population has expanded, but the percentage of people in extreme poverty has actually gone less. So there have been remarkable increases in the quality of life, but that's when I said AI. That's kind of what I was kind of referring to, is that goods have become cheaper. If you look at what a personal computer cost in 1990 versus now, it's on way cheaper, right? I mean, that's a high end good, but goods have become cheaper. Wages have gone up for the top 20-30% of the world. They haven't gone up. They're pretty flat for the other 60-70%. Right, and so there's equity issues within the distribution of income within all of that, and the rich make money by investing their money back into financial services. So it's all passive income. Economists call that rent-seeking behavior. Basically, they're not contributing to the economy, but they're still profiting from just the growth of capital. Right. So there's all these other sort of issues tied into there that we can kind of really look at and say, is that can we change the economy in positive ways for everybody else? But I suspect what's going to happen is AI will be leveraged instead to like, hey, we're going to make just enough housing, just enough food or a pill that you take once a day that you don't die. And it gives you everything if you don't have. And we'll give you universal basic income, but housing, health, because once a robot can provide basic primary care, you'll log in and it'll diagnose you. Everybody will have free healthcare through a machine that is powered by the sun, essentially, right? But are you equal at that point to somebody who actually has income and the power to move around and alter their destiny at that point? AI will enable that, right? And so
yeah, I feel like the Matrix made a big impression on us. Like we all saw it, so we're all a little like. I mean,
scared.
The people who are all eager to have us stay in during the pandemic, they didn't seem to it didn't make an impression on them, but but it made an impression on a lot of us. We're like, yeah, I don't know if staying in one place and doing everything in a stationary manner,
It's
just being
positive.
stimulated while I just sit still.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
It's good for us.
that sounds a little, that doesn't. I associate that with sort of a negative outcome.
Yeah, I've seen this somewhere in a film before, right?
Yeah,
The machine is egging you along. Go ahead, find your, yeah, whatever it is, right? Find
yeah.
your happiness in that. But yeah, and that's what I fear though, is that it's that we're provided just enough income to become consumers for those who are actually profiting, and because our basic needs are provided for by technology,
To,
and
yeah, it seems like so much of our our problem, like when I think of like what's where are people being deprived, or where are people living less than, but doesn't a lot of that come down to education? Like those people, like if they're um I don't know, like if our young people are well educated, then they can make their own opportunities and they can learn
right,
to code or whatever. Like
yeah,
learning to code is the standard response that's given to these
yeah,
people without economic opportunity.
learn to code.
And
Yeah. You gotta fix
but
everything.
but that
Yeah.
but that speaks but it does speak very clearly to the issue of like AI, where like, oh, AI is doing work for people,
Yeah.
but like, well, if you learn how the AI works, then right, like that would be the
It's a standard economic rejoinder, which is basically like, well, we didn't lament the passing of the horse-drawn carriage, but this, but right, that argument has its limits when it comes to artificial intelligence. When something is, it's not improving your ability to do things. It is right now, and that's what technologists are saying, that for those who are productive and can plug in, it'll make them hyper efficient. So like, it'll improve those who are needed, and it'll replace a lot. So like, what are the rest going to do?
it is a transformative, potentially a really transformative thing that's happening. Uh,
It is.
I mean, because I can sort of feel it acting in my own life, like both ways. Like certainly, there's a lot of jobs. Like sometimes there's jobs like I'll settle into some task of like alphabetizing or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, I could do this as a job. I could do a business. Like I started cataloging my parents' books recently, and I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I can start a business where I catalog people's books.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, that could be automated really quickly. You know what I
Quickly.
mean?
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
that's not a business that would be that safe
Yeah.
for long, or you don't
Sustainable.
necessarily have
Yeah.
like a lot of people employed. Might
Yeah.
get robots instead or something like that.
Right. That's
Um,
that's exact. That's
But
exactly.
on the
it.
same level, of course, like I'm definitely in the mind space of wanting to do something more, artistic or creative.
Right. Right.
I mean,
And that's the potential of AI too.
yeah.
And I think that's the potential, is that, well, if people have, Marx always used to joke, right? And I don't mean to keep citing Marx here.
Oh, yeah,
I'm not
he-
trying to, yeah. But it's like, he used to joke, like, a man. I don't know if it was joking is the right word, but that famous phrase, a man should fish in the morning and do something else in the afternoon and something else during
Mhm.
the rest of the day. There's just this understanding that humans are creative and want to do different things, different times, and so it could free us to do those things, right? But but when you have systems of control, which are basically designed to see you as a consumer, and that as a consumer you need to fill a role and consume things, because you have a system that sort of needs you to be consuming things, right? It relies upon that. Then that becomes more difficult, because your role is not then to be free and self-actualize. Your role is fundamentally as a consumer, right? And so that shift has to occur, where we are not, and like we were talking about this earlier, we have to conceptualize alternatives where it is not just this sort of global capitalist, and global capitalism isn't quite captured, but it's where we are in a market-based economy where companies produce things and they have to be scaled, and then these companies have to grow, like that whole model, which really started in, I mean, trade has always existed, but modern sort of global capitalist system really starts after World War II, a Bretton Woods agreement where IMF, World Bank, U.S. became the world's reserve currency. All that happened maybe 100, so years ago, and Um, but maybe it's run its course, and we need to conceptualize alternatives as to what the world economy looks like.
I do feel. I mean, I don't know. I has my feeling is, I guess, not really a big data point, but
No,
maybe
but
there,
why is
maybe
it
there's
not? Yeah.
something. Well, quantitatively speaking, I don't know. Right?
Oh, you're a mathematician. You could say that. Yeah, you know the limits. Math is a tool, but there's an underlying set of assumptions that it's used to.
Well, we'll put it as a question then. Better to put it as a question. Do you think there has been a shift in the zeitgeist, or how would you describe? I guess because of course there has been.
Yeah.
How would you describe the shift in the zeitgeist over the last maybe just 5 years?
Why you can only? I think you mean more in the U.S., right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um.
Well, I mean, it might be worldwide because the pandemic was worldwide,
Yeah.
and also the U.S. is such a leader anyway. So like the world, I think
Yeah.
the U.S. is pretty central to what's going on in the world. And you've brought up some world themes with like how
Yeah.
the poverty has been, you know,
Extreme poverty has been reduced.
lessened. Yeah.
Yeah, but during the pandemic, it actually that negative trend is something like 60 to 115 million people somewhere were thrust back into extreme poverty.
Okay.
That was how, and this is where like even pandemic responses were. This is where we can't cookie cutter planning solutions, right? Like a response in India may not be appropriate for response in China is not is appropriate for response in the U.S. Everybody, people are different, economies are different. It's right like India has a large number of day laborers, for example, right? And if you shut everything down there, I mean, you have hundreds of millions of people who are part of the informal economy who are now no longer employed. You just push them back into extreme poverty. You have to weigh the pros and cons of a pandemic with a young population that is now unemployed,
Right.
right? And and there's many different stories in different parts of the world, right? If you're in a country where you have a mostly older population that is highly vulnerable or maybe that has other issues, your response is different, right? And I think when we talk about planning, that's what we mean. The planning it has to evaluate context always, right? And what's appropriate, and also trade-offs. Like there are right answers given your underlying values, and if your values are different, your answers are going to be different also, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty important. So like, but this is a kind of a common theme. I think that's important to sort of to really think about in every area. It's like, okay, if we're going to say, what do we want to achieve as a human race, we have to first sort of agree upon like what are the things that we do care about, and only then can you begin to say, okay, because if we're like, we don't care, we don't actually care about cats and the dogs and the animals, we just care about humans surviving, those answers are very different than if we care about
Mm-hmm.
plants and animals and us.
Aligning with values. Well, value alignment is a big thing with AI. Like to program it,
Right.
like its objective function, is based on whether we can agree on some values that it should then
What's the start?
maximize. Midas was the ultimate problem of value alignment because
Yeah.
he got his he turned everything to gold like that. It worked really well at turning everything to gold. It just turned out that wasn't his.
What we wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, what's the zeitgeist? Coming back to the question, I mean, the pandemic was sort of the what do you call the big independent value or the independent variable in all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the world, and I think it in the U.S. it brought out a lot of. So let me see if I can answer this. I think mistrust. Like if I want to simplify it into like things, people there's a mistrust of institutions that has become, and so on every side, right,
Mhm.
left, whatever you call it, right.
Mhm.
There's a fundamental mistrust of institutions, whether it's your government, whether it's institutions that purport to do good
Mhm.
in the health arena, whether it's institutions that are purporting to educate your kids. Like we felt let down as a species.
Yeah. By each other.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and when we were pointing to institutions, who are we really pointing to,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right, at the end? And but also, in my opinion, I think that can be a good thing. You
Yeah.
sometimes need to go through the night before you can collectively act to go towards the light. But sometimes you don't make it through the night. as a
Yeah.
species.
Yeah. You're talking about like what do you call it, population altering events or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
like we could, yeah, it could get dicey, but it's hard to believe now we're sitting here, in a safe room. I mean, walking around Oakland. You're talking about Oakland. Oakland feels very safe to
Yeah.
me lately. It
Yeah.
didn't. It didn't 2 years ago
Really?
or 3 years ago. In
Wow.
2020 was
Yeah.
when I think the.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. You live here. I
Hmm.
wouldn't. I don't know the experience here, but yeah. I love walking around. I mean, again, I don't know the city that well, so it's. I mean, I was walking around Rio trying to go to different places, and people stopped me. So to me, I mean, I see people and they're very attractive. It's like, what are you doing? How are you living? What kind of,
Uh
food
huh.
are you cooking?
Uh huh.
How do you socialize? People are so fascinating in the way they live, and I- you know, and, and maybe we end with this is that I think we have to make a choice, and even if that choice is, it's like Albert Camus, in the myth of Sisyphus says, like that rock is always going to roll down on you, but that's not the point. If you have to make a choice about what the process is about, and if you choose to be optimistic and say I'm going to fight for the human race, fight for the planet, then you should do it in ways that are meaningful to you. If you care about whatever issue, I would say just get involved. Get involved daily. I'm sorry, get involved weekly, monthly, but consistently. If you're like, all I can do is once a month, then do that. If I can do once a week, then do that. And if you care about the whales, you care about food, you care about economics, care about equity, whatever it is, because in that conversation in that interaction, when people are actually doing things like Alexis Tocqueville, who wandered around the United States when it was first being formed, right in the 1880s, he said the singular strength of our country was that Americans are forever organizing. He was like, this is a crazy nation where, like, you get five people together and they get angry and they're like, this is the cause, and they form groups and they put out little things and they're organizing. To him, that was like the strength of the nation, civic engagement. And now it has been consistently falling for the last few hundred years. And um, if we're going to be, as U.S., if we see ourselves as a leader to the planet, like, we need to be involved.
But did you say consistently falling for what?
Falling.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Like volunteering.
Oh.
Volunteering is
Oh,
plummeted.
volunteerism. Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's plummeted across all domains. I mean, churches were kind of the last bastion, and it's fallen in churches as well.
So maybe you're suggesting like potentially. I think with volunteerism, it's also the suggestion of like civic mindedness or generosity as like just a value. Like there's
The underlying value, like, but it comes back to what you said in the beginning. It comes back full circle. Your underlying value has to be to do good. And now, once you're like, okay, how do I do good? You're gonna have great arguments with people you disagree with. That's the point, actually. And to do it in a way that's sometimes not civil, but mostly civil, right? That's okay. I mean, we barely get along with our families, right? Half the time, like, we don't talk to them. Sometimes we get angry. You've heard of that in every family. Those are the rhythms of being alive, being a human being. But it's better than being locked away. It's, and you know this. I mean, you've been involved with one or more causes forever. It's pretty cool. Like, whether you want to call it a dopamine hit or whatever it is, it's like it's the community you build is pretty cool, and it's different communities in different ways. You have different groups of friends who do different things, right? And yeah, you're never lonely, also. So.
Well, yeah, I think that is a great note to end on. Dude, thanks a lot for talking into a microphone.
This was fun. I feel like these are conversations we always have,
That's
except
right.
now it's in a
That's right.
microphone.
There's a natural
Yeah.
setup. All right. Well, thanks a lot, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Yeah.